welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen, and these are my colour conversations. In this session, we'll be looking at another film, and the film is The Witches of Eastwick. I watched this at the cinema back in 1987 when it was first released, and it was based on a book written in 1984. It was a huge box office success. There were praise for its actors, particularly for Jack Nicholson, the main character. And although the plot line or the storyline received a fair amount of criticism, the Rotten Tomatoes score for this film still maintains 67%. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you do so because I'm not going to be looking at the plot in any detail today. It's been streamed recently, so there's no reason for you not to have a look at it. The critics' consensus for the film was that while devotees of John Updike's novel may want to put a hex on George Miller's cartoonish and effects-laden adaptation, Jack Nicholson lends enough decadent devilry to make this high-concept comedy sizzle. And sizzle it certainly does. The viewers' consensus was even more praising. The Witches of Eastwick is a very well-acted movie with fantasy, comedy, and dark magic. It's an underrated supernatural film to watch, full of charm and intrigue. This movie has one of the best castings in the supernatural film. Jack Nicholson was born to play the devil in this hilarious flick about three women who come together to conjure up the perfect guy. It has everything, a little bit of female friendship, love and magic, and a lot of crazy. Weirdly sweet ending as well. The impressions that were left with me after the initial viewing were of two main colours, red, which is all about cherries and their use as a weapon, and black, which tended to denote the demon and the witches. But a recent review of this film for this colour analysis has shown something entirely different. So, before we start, of course, I'd like once again to welcome those of you who've been following this series of films. You'll need to have some background information about colour signification, and you'll receive that from one of my other playlists, which has to do with colour personalities and just colour analysis generally. If you haven't seen the relevant information about those colours, then some of this video may just pass you by, but hopefully it won't be too strenuous. If you're new here, you're doubly welcome. If you like what you see, why not click that like button and also perhaps even consider subscribing. It is free. All right, let's get into it, shall we? And here we begin with the cast. There are three best friends who are all single women. They're unaware they are witches, and they have regular meetings in an informal coven in which they try to conjure up their image of an ideal man. The arrival in town of a mysterious man makes for a lot of changes in their lives. In fact, it becomes quite transformative. And of course, it brings out their powers. Looking at each of these characters in the order in which they appear, we first meet Alexandra, or Alex, as she's known throughout the film. Her husband has died. She's a single mother of a teenage daughter, and she is the most intellectual of the group. She sculpts little fertility figurines, and she's also the first to meet Daryl. Her meeting with Daryl transforms the art and also, to some extent, her appearance. Nevertheless, she's primarily seen in black, blue, and brown clothing. Next, we see Jane. Now, she's newly divorced and unable to bear children. She's the most uptight of the group. She's a musician and also a part-time teacher. She is, however, objectified by her boss, who holds over her the potential for a full-time job. She's the second to meet Daryl, and she's also the most physically transformed of the group. She primarily is seen in white and grey originally, but later is clad in black and red. And then we turn to Suki. Suki was deserted by her husband. She is the mother of 6 daughters, so therefore shows herself to have high fertility. She's also the most caring or realistic of the group, and she is the first to recognize a synchronicity between the thoughts of what the 3 do when they come together and what happens in the real world. She's the columnist for the local newspaper, and she's also the last to be seduced. But she's also the most severely punished by Daryl when things go awry. She is the least transformed of the 3, and her costumes are mainly kept in pastel colours. The next character is Felicia. Now, is Felicia a witch herself, or is she a psychic? We don't really know, but she certainly is an upstanding community member. She's also Daryl's first victim. She recognizes the evil that's associated with Suki's involvement with Daryl, and she has an outburst in the church which causes her to lose her mind. She is attacked by the cherries and in the process loses her sanity and also her life. And finally, we have Daryl van Horne, the devil of the piece. He arrives during a major storm at night and begins to fulfill their desires. He conducts an intellectual seduction of Alex, who wanted someone to talk to. He has an artistic or musical seduction of Jane because she wants someone to be herself with. And he appeals to Suki's maternal side, who really just wants somebody nice. In the process, however, he also uncovers their fears. Jane is afraid of growing old. Alex is fearful of being covered by snakes, and Suki's fear is of pain. Towards the end of the film, we also witness Daryl's transformation. He becomes angry at the ghosting of the 3 women. He plots revenge. He has confusion during the magic attack that they initiate against him, and that then turns to fury. He reverts to his demon manifestation, and in the end, he attempts seduction of his baby sons. So rather than look at the plot in detail, let's go immediately into the analysis of the colours, because there is a lot to look at here. It's a dark fantasy comedy which involves multiple indoor scenes, and there are lots of outdoor shots as well. The analysis of the colours, unfortunately, must include not just the costumes of the characters, but also the artefacts around them and with which they interact. My initial retained impression of the film as containing black and red as the primary colours, however, proved to be false when I looked at it again. So let's look at these colours in the frequency of appearance as costume or important artefact. White appears 33 times, red 25 times, black 17, blue 11. I've placed orange, yellow, and gold in the same category, and they in combination appear 10 times. Brown occurs 9 times, and then green 4 times. However, the most important colour for this analysis is actually pink. And although it only appears 15 times, we will leave this to the last in the analysis because it is also the most intriguing. So let's begin with white. This also includes some pastels and greys. I haven't differentiated between them because that would make this analysis far too long. White usually represents innocence, honesty, and openness. So let's see how that plays out for this film. Alex's figurines, Suki's children's clothing, Jane's introductory school outfit, her boss's garments, when Jane and Suki appear at the assembly, Suki's office jacket, Jane's concert shirt, Suki's pearls, which break, causing Felicia's fall. Alex's doodle of D into some spilled sugar. And Daryl's manservant at lunch. We have Jane's practice outfit at home, Felicia in the hospital, all three witches in white bathrobes following a fall into Daryl's swimming pool. Then, of course, there are the clothing worn by the judgmental shopping patrons, Alex's clothing at the post-scandal dinner, Felicity as she finds her first cherry pip, when Jane arrives at the church following Felicia's death, when Daryl phones Alex for a reconciliation or an explanation as to why they have been ghosting him, Jane's delight at news that she is no longer infertile but in fact pregnant, Alex rushing to confront Daryl about Suki, and Daryl's white trousers and shirt after the reconciliation. Then we have the candles that Alex melts in order to make an effigy of Daryl, the effigy that is stabbed by all three witches, and the feathers that the witches blow over the effigy. Daryl's body reacting to the feathers, and his struggles against the wind. He realizes what's happening as he enters the church, which is also in white. And when the effigy breaks into three pieces, we find that Daryl finally meets his end. The baby boys in the bath at the end of the film are in a white tub. Daryl's loyal manservant entertains the boys, and the families working in a white canopied room all have white as the primary colours throughout their scenes. So what about the analysis of white in this film? Well, exploring or desiring something comes through in the performances in white of Alex, Jane, Suki, and Daryl as well. They're all after something for themselves. They're all trying to discover what they need. But the white also indicates that they are recipients of secrets or knowledge that is otherwise not easily ascertained. And here we have Felicia as being the primary bearer of this particular interpretation of white. She's the only one who recognizes that there is some basic evil in the town, and also is able to pinpoint just where that evil comes from. The other people who are recipients of secrets or knowledge are, of course, the women in the shop. They all are aware of the gossip surrounding the three women, the three friends, and are quite prepared to be catty about it. Then, of course, we have white as innocence or non-judgmentalism, and this is shown in the actions of Daryl's manservant, who throughout the film remains silent, but nevertheless shows that his loyalty is all about doing what his job entails rather than being involved with any of the actions as such. So even though white is supposed to imply innocence, honesty, and openness, in fact, we have something a little different here for the signification of the colour white. Let's now move on to red. Now, red is a little more difficult to ascertain because there isn't a very large quantity of it. Most of it comes through as artifacts rather than as costumes for the characters. But red normally denotes dominance, passion, and also an indicator of potential danger. So here we see Suki's eldest daughter has a doll, and also Suki is working in the garden, and there are some red tomatoes. Jane's boss's tie at the assembly is also red, as is the door to Alex's house, as she welcomes her two friends in for their regular Thursday evening meeting. Daryl's cravat at his lunch with Alex and his slippers during the seduction of Alex are also red. Jane's cut finger from a broken string of her cello is also very briefly a flash of red. And then we have the manservant interrupting the balloon party flight, and in doing so causes them all to fall into the pool. After the fall into the pool, the ladies are entertained with a bowl of fruit, most of which is red. And then we have the red carpet in the church where Felicia slowly loses her mind. And after the scandal has erupted in town, the manservant at the dinner is also clad in red. We see red shoes on Jane as she goes shopping, and her dress is also as a bright red colour. After the scandal has erupted and they've talked about what to do, they have a bowl of cherries presented to them by Daryl, who also conjures up revenge on Felicity with the cherries as he lounges in the pool, continuing to feed them to the three women. Daryl offers Suki some fruit, which is also red, after he attempts his reconciliation, and he leaves a message in red on Jane's door. Daryl is brooding revengeance on rejection, and this is the only time he actually wears red items of clothing. The manservant, still clad in red, does not stop Jane's entry with her exciting news of an upcoming pregnancy. But she notices that Daryl's anger is also making the red fruit in the bowl rot. What is more, Daryl slices one of the red items of fruit to give Suki some agony. And when Alex arrives to confront Daryl, the manservant tries to warn her of the danger that she is entertaining. As the witches put their plan into practice, Jane collects some items of Daryl's, one of which, of course, is bright red. Meanwhile, out at the ice cream vendor, who is also wearing red, Daryl's pain first emerges. Then we have one of Suki's daughters wearing a red dress at the table towards the end of the film, and a red-clad doll plus a few other red items are seen in the foreground as the boys are enticed into the TV room by images of Daryl. So what does this do to the film? How does red display dominance, passion, or danger? All three of those significations of the colour red certainly exist, but the fact that they are not consistent across all of the reds makes for an interesting interpretation. Danger ahead is seen with the use of the dolls, Jane's boss's tie, her cut finger, the fruit, both fresh and rotting, the church carpet, and finally the child's dress, are all precursors to something dangerous happening. But there's also red as a change in progress. The manservant changes from white to red throughout the film, indicating a different way of determining just what is likely to happen next or what is already happening. And generally, when he's wearing red, there is already a drama in process. Red also means dominance. So Alex's door shows that she is the hostess for the meetings. Daryl's door message to Jane also is an indicator of his attempt to dominate her. Then we have sexual passion. Daryl's tie and slippers indicate what his desires are towards Alex, and Jane's shopping attire, while not necessarily an indication of what her desire is certainly an indication of the sexual passion that has now awakened her and transformed her quite thoroughly. Red as a colour worn by women in films generally indicates that that woman is going to be in some way promiscuous or act in a provocative way. In this film, She is not promiscuous as such, nor is she about to act in a provocative way. If anything, the red is an indicator of danger towards her, because now she becomes aware of the hostility of the other women and probably also the men involved in the little town of Eastwick. And finally, red also indicates vengeance passion. And here we have Daryl's reaction to the ghosting. The only time he wears red, he is livid because he is unable to reach the three women that he had seduced so successfully and were now trying to keep their distance from him. So red indicates a lot more than the basic ideas that we normally have of what red signifies. Let's now turn to black. Here, black is all about power, hidden motives, and secrets as a rule. Alex wears a black top at the assembly and becomes bored and muses about how things could be different. All three women have, in fact, engaged in that musing, but Alex is the only one in black, and the entirety of their wishes causes a gathering storm to approach the township. And it's during this storm that Daryl arrives in town. Jane's jacket at Alex's little assembly is also one way of indicating that she has some sort of hidden motive. When Alex discovers that Daryl has bought all of her figurines, she also is wearing black. Felicia and her husband at the concert where Jane is playing are both in black, and Daryl's present at the concert is shown him wearing black as he snores loudly throughout the proceedings. When Alex goes in search of Daryl at his home, she's also in black, as is Daryl as he hosts the balloon party, which unveils all three women and their children in a party atmosphere. Alex and Suki at that party are wearing black, although Suki is also partially in white and gold. And Daryl's hat and camera recording the women's fears is also in black. Please note that Daryl's attire also includes some purple. I'm not going to deal with purple at all in this analysis because purple doesn't feature as a prominent color in its own right. It tends to align with the meanings associated with black. And when Felicia is removed from the church by her husband, once again, she is wearing black, but also some amount of purple that goes with it. When Jane returns to teaching after her transformation, she's in a black and red skirt and a black and white top. And these two tend to indicate that she now has some form of inspired teaching methodology. Suki and Jane at the post-scandal dinner are both wearing black, and Alex and Suki, whilst watching Felicia's husband arrested for her death, are also wearing black, although you'll note that blue and grey appear as well for Suki. We'll look at those later, and brown for Alex. Again, I'll look at those later. When Daryl is confronted by Alex, he's in black doing his own housework and not very happy about it. After the reconciliation, Alex is also wearing black. The burnt items of Daryl's apparel that Jane has gathered together are added to the wax effigy, and that concludes the amount of black that appears in the film. So what does that signify for this film? Power, hidden motives, and secrets are what black is usually about. But here we find that black also includes boredom, adventure, and sadness. And this is something that is attained by Alex, Jane, and Suki in turn. They're bored at the beginning of the film because they're on their own and their weekly meetings are simply three women chatting about the same things over and over. The adventure comes as they meet and become involved with Daryl, and sadness occurs not only when the damage is being created to all three women, but also when they finally decide that Daryl has to go. Black also stands for a rigid nature, and this is shown very much in the way that Felicia acts. Everything she does is about her religious rigidity and also her Puritanist type of attitude towards all of the people in the town, and those three women in particular. Hidden motives and revenge, of course, are natural activities associated with the color black. And here we find that Daryl is the one who is the bearer of this particular signification of black, although the ashes used for the effigy are also part of this hidden motive and revenge. Moving on now to the color blue. This is generally about nurture, about communication, and also to some degree about honesty. We see Suki's skirt in the garden as she takes her children to school, Suki's shirt at Alex's, and Jane's shirt at Alex's as well are blue. When Suki is working in the office, she's wearing a blue skirt. Alex and Suki discover Jane's transformation, both of them wearing blue. The floating room above the pool is also lit in blue, and after the pool fall, Alex's pillow is blue, and after Felicia's death, Suki is also wearing blue. And this is when she realizes the gravity of the situation that the three women now find themselves in. When Suki refuses Daryl's overtures for reconciliation, she's wearing several colors, blue being the uppermost. Once in hospital and in incredible pain, Suki begs her friends to stop Daryl wearing a blue night dress. And Daryl's final appearances on the TV sets when he is enticing his sons towards him are also backgrounded in blue. So how does blue relate in this film? Is it about nurture, communication, and honesty, as blue generally indicates? Well, yes, generally that is the case. But we also have a maternal side to the color blue. And Suki embodies this. Her main color is blue, and she is shown in it every time she is doing something nurturing for other people. There's also trusting friendship between Suki, Jane, and Alex, and even though there is rivalry at times, all three will wear blue as an indicator of their closeness. There's an exposure of truth, and this is when Alex and Suki uncover the fact that Jane is now massively transformed, but also during the time after Felicia's death, when they both discuss what it is that their involvement has done to the town. And then finally, there's also blue worn by Daryl as he attempts to communicate with his sons. Even though he's no longer physically present, his spirit is very much in attendance. The next most common color to appear is the orange, yellow, gold combination. And these colors generally have to do with shock, discontent, but also with learning. So what do we have here? We have Jane's hair and the tennis ball that she's about to lobby. Alex's yellow hair ribbons are also seen at that same tennis party, and it's the only time she wears a color other than white, blue, or black as her signifiers. The tennis ball that does some unusual things, of course, is bright orange and becomes the focus of a great deal of attention throughout this particular scene. Daryl's manipulation of the match not only involves the orange tennis ball, but it also involves an orange glow that permeates across him as he's playing tennis. We have gold in the costumes for both Jane and Suki at the balloon party, and the manservant who is dealing with Daryl while he has been ghosted by the three women is also wearing an orange outfit. When Jane appears at Daryl's door wanting to inform him about her pregnancy, she's wearing an orange outfit. And the lampshade that is in the room as Alex confronts Daryl about his damage to Suki is also bright orange. And then, while they're waiting for Daryl's return after their magic attack upon him, they have lots of orange artifacts in the room with them. And the final appearance of yellow occurs in the baby walkers as the three sons are enticed into the TV room. So, does orange and yellow actually deal with shock, discontent, and learning in this film? Well, there is an awakening that occurs. Jane, of course, is the most transformed, and her awakening colour is orange. Her hair colour is the most prominent aspect of this, and we notice it as the main feature of Jane throughout the major part of the film. Alex also has an awakening taking place, but this time the awakening occurs through her yellow ribbons when she realizes that Daryl is not satisfied with just one of them, that in fact he wants all three. Then we have orange as a signifier within the rivalry and reconciliation of the tennis match, where they fight with one another and then gradually the friendship resumes as the tennis ball, the orange object that they're all throwing around, does things that no tennis ball really should. We also find orange as a colour of social support. The manservant in looking after Daryl after the women who ghosted him is wearing orange, and Alex, as she comes in to confront Daryl, passes by an orange lamp. Now, her initial reaction is to challenge him, but in fact, what she does is reconcile with him, and so therefore makes things better for all of them. And finally, yellow appears again as curiosity. This time, the curiosity adheres to the babies who wander towards the room where Daryl's image is flashed up and he wants to talk to them virtually. Our next colour of note is brown. This is usually about honesty, ambition, and manipulation. And in fact, it demonstrates quite a bit of that. Alex, working in her kitchen, is wearing brown. Jane's school work clothing are also primarily in brown, although a very pastel shade. When Alex hosts the group at home, she's in brown. And when Daryl surprises her on the fields outside his property, he's also wearing a jacket and hat that are brown. Daryl's brown violin case allows him entry to Jane's house, and his suit at the post-scandal dinner helps them to come to terms with the fact that they are now going to be talked about regardless of what their actions may or may not be. When Alex and Suki discuss the problem of Felicia's death, she is wearing brownish grey trousers. And Daryl's attempt at reconciliation with Suki is made with a brown basket of fruit. And finally, we have Suki seeking out the Maleficio book to bring it back to the three of them so that they can create a spell to rid themselves of Daryl. So, does brown actually indicate honesty, ambition, and manipulation? Well, it certainly initiates the idea of creativity. Both Alex and Jane are creatively challenged and transformed by use of the colour brown. Narcissism is also a feature of brown in this case. Narcissism is shown by Daryl, whose entire attitude towards the women and what is happening to them is all about his own needs, his desires, and what he wants to achieve out of his experiences with them. And then finally, brown also stands for skill development. The witches are aware that they have some powers, but they don't know how to use them. So the book that Suki brings towards them is then able to provide the answers to the magic that they need. A much less frequent colour seen in this film is green. And normally green stands for freedom, for values, and also for potential. Suki's eldest child, complaining about the zucchini jelly, which by coincidence also happens to be green, even though we don't see it, is wearing a green dress. When Suki's raincoat appears at Alex's house, this suggests that there is some sort of challenge to their ideas. She has noticed the synchronicity of what they were dreaming about and what has happened. When Suki confronts her newspaper boss about the gossip column that he has written in the paper, she's also wearing a green top. And the carpet outside the TV room, where the babies are enticed to go and visit Daryl, their father, is also green. So does green, in fact, stand for freedom, values, and potential? Well, it certainly stands for critical inquiry. Suki's daughter wants to know what's for lunch, and she's not terribly impressed by it. There's also an expression of beliefs as Suki confronts both the issue of what is happening to their wishes and how these are transformed into realities, but also when she confronts her boss about what it is that he has written about them. And finally, new life or potential is also seen in the colour green as the babies are being summoned to the TV room. And now finally we come to probably the most important colour of all in this film, and that is pink. Pink is normally about love, vulnerability, and also it's the baby colour. It's about infancy. So let's see what it actually portrays. When Suki is in her office on the phone to Alex, she's wearing a pink shirt. Felicia's shirt and flowers in the office as she's getting ready to do some good is also in pink. And when Jane has finished her concert, she receives some pink roses from Daryl. Daryl has a pink pergola that he uses for the lunch in which he begins his seduction of Alex. His bedspread is also pink, which continues that same seduction. Suki's flowers intended for Felicia in hospital are pink, and the balloons in the playroom where the entire families and women congregate to have an evening of fun are also pink. Then, after the women have fallen into the water and had to change into bathrobes, Suki's pillow is seen to be pink, and she is the last of the three to tell Daryl about what her greatest fear is. Daryl's attempt at reconciliation with Alex sees her answering his phone call, snuggling under a pink bedspread. And when he attempts the reconciliation with Suki, she's wearing pink stripes on her otherwise blue dress. Alex is later woken by a snake in her bed, still snuggled under that same pink bedspread. And after their reconciliation, we see Daryl himself transformed. Now, this time he is wearing a lot of pink. Pink is an unusual colour for a male to wear at all. And in this case, it has a great deal of significance, which I'll talk about in a moment. His journey home is quite treacherous, and the further he travels, as he tries to reach the witches before they can damage him further, the more treacherous the journey becomes. The effigy is hidden inside a pink canister, keeping it safe from the dog, who had actually been responsible for some of the damage to Daryl's drive home. And when Daryl actually arrives back at his home, the pink is absolutely filthy because of the damage to him on the journey, but also as a signifier of his rage. So how does pink actually signify in this film? Is it about love, vulnerability, and infancy? Well, to a certain extent, yes. There is an indication of vulnerability in the fact that the women lack power. Suki's fear of pain becomes a reality, and Alex's dread of snakes are both indicators of their lack of power over Daryl. But Daryl himself also is an indicator of lacking in power. Once he dons the pink, he then becomes someone who is vulnerable to the attack by the three witches. They are able to get to him, not because he has lost his powers, but because their powers combined are more powerful than his. And also the dog lacks the power to be able to get the effigy back from the canister and possibly hide it so that the witches are unable to finish their magic. Pink also denotes a certain degree of self-centeredness. Felicia in pink towards the beginning of the film is all about her being centered on her own needs and drives and her situation, her position within the community. Daryl as well in his pink is indicating a degree of self-centeredness. This is his narcissism on display. It's all about him and his feelings of success at having reconciled with the three women, and now he is master, or so he thinks. Pink as an offer of love also adheres to Daryl, only this time it is the artifacts with which he deals. So the pink canopy for lunch with Alex and also his bedspread are indicators of his desire for her. And finally, we have infantile rage, which occurs, of course, when babies are very upset. And that also adheres to Daryl. And as we note this happening, the infantile rage then becomes a dirtier and dirtier and dirtier pink until the pink almost resembles brown, which, as I've already mentioned, is all about ambition and goals and his ability to overcome whatever needs to be done in order to achieve his particular ambitions. So let's now summarize these colors. White is all about exploration, awareness, and innocence in this film. Red indicates danger and passion, but also vengeance. Black is about boredom, rigidity, and secrets, whereas blue indicates nurture, trust, and communication. The orange-yellow combinations are all about rivalry, support, and also curiosity. Brown indicates creativity and skill development. Green is about critical thinking and new life. And of course, pink is about powerlessness, self-obsession, and also love. So that's my analysis of the film The Witches of Eastwick. What would you have made of it if you had sat through and watched for color content rather than storyline? I'd be very interested to know. And if you have a comment or would like to challenge me on any of the things that I've said, please leave them below. I'd be more than happy to engage because let's face it, conversations in color aren't much of a conversation if I'm the only one doing the talking. So that's it for this session. I hope you've enjoyed it. And may the colors of your life bring you as much satisfaction as the colors of the lives of these three witches did for them. Until next time, bye.